This is Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War multiplayer mode. Just like my campaign mode film, I am going to show you frame stills from the game, making it seem like frame stills of a supposed movie. My objective also remains the same. I want to capture scale, space, and time. I want you to think about how environments can feel big or small, yet are realistic manifestations of what we expect these places to feel like if we entered them. Some of these places feel normal to us. Others feel very creepy and bleak. And a lot of them just have us become curious about what we are looking at, especially because the in-game graphics look so good that they might fool some of us into thinking it's real life. Unlike the campaign, multiplayer maps tell a story of their own. Because with the campaign, you live out the story as the mission progresses, and the map may or may not change to reflect that. In multiplayer, the story the maps tell for the most part are occurring in real time with how they are designed. Meaning the team you play as, NATO or Warsaw Pact, reflects the events and context set up by the map to reflect the map's purpose and the Cold War narrative. That isn't to say the multiplayer maps are better in storytelling than the campaign maps, but rather, multiplayer maps are, by design, to be rich with clues and context to tell this story to the player. And with so many maps across so many different settings, there is a lot of continuity in the Cold War multiplayer narrative. Every map canonically tells a story, and when you are going guns blazing playing multiplayer like usual, you're not going to really notice the story the map is telling. Even if you played the map 100 times, you really have to stop and look to piece together what exactly is going on in the map away from player-led events. Something I did just a little bit of were taking frame stills outside the playable boundaries. Of course, I said every map has a story to tell, but you can't forget about the parts of the story that exist outside the player area. Not all maps have a meaningful out-of-bounds story setup, but the ones that do will probably go unnoticed by the player or even be completely out of the player's view altogether. So the ones I have chosen to capture are the ones that have caught my attention the most from this perspective. A perspective that even I didn't know existed. I had to get adventurous in finding out there was more outside the map. The photos you have been seeing are perspectives and angles I could replicate in real life for the most part. But since I had free reign inside the multiplayer maps, I became curious about aerial photography. Something that I have never done before and something I haven't studied before. So I decided to get as creative as I could with these shots. Not all of them are all that engaging, yet it was a fun experience coming from a beginner nonetheless. Especially with my map overview or top-down shots, these were especially harder for me to capture as I had no idea as to what really is the narrative behind these shots. But the one that naturally came out to be the best one was, of course, the hijacked yacht, naturally. Even though I had fun with the majority of the maps, it was hard just to choose two favorite maps during my photographing experience. However, when thinking about maps that provided me an experience I could just connect to, I found my favorites. The first is the pines. When photographing the map, all I could think about were liminal spaces, which are notoriously associated with dead, empty malls. Even though these said dead, empty malls are usually very dark and you are creeped out because you're the only one there, there's also another side to the coin. Just photographing an empty mall before its opening day tells a story about what you can expect from an upcoming social hub that will serve the surrounding community. Will it survive? Will it prosper? It's an empty mall before its grand opening, and that's what makes it bleak. If you wanted to add in the additional context about the mall housing Nova 6, then I'm sure it would just give you the chills. And I like associating dead malls with vaporwave themes, and even though most of the mall does not necessarily have these vaporwave aesthetics, I'd like to think that it still gives off this vibe. Then we have Miami Strike, the Nuketown version of the original Miami app, so to speak. Although I love the original Miami map for its night setting and the story it tells, I really enjoy the story Miami Strike tells you. Really cut and simple. It's just an automotive show with the sun ever so gleaming through the light rain shower that just occurred. It's almost like I can imagine myself being right there with how realistic the graphics are. Whether inside or outside, the map is just beautiful. Simple, but beautiful. I imagine myself just casually strolling down with taking these pictures as if I was physically there, and that's what made this map memorable for me. Although I am very satisfied with the 800 plus photos taken here, my free roaming method that allowed me to photograph the maps only allowed me to photograph 23 out of the 34 or so maps out there. So that means roughly 11 maps went unphotographed because my method couldn't work on those maps without at least one additional player in my lobby, which to no avail, I couldn't make happen. But if I ever decide to come back to this game to take more photographs, at least I know that with my unfinished business, I've got a job to do. Especially since I wanted to photograph the gunfight maps, or even maps like Diesel and Deprogram, which I really was looking forward to. You might also have noticed that the game version ID is at the very top of every frame still, and that's because I wasn't going to Photoshop the 800 plus photos I took, which would have taken a ridiculous amount of time. And that's to say that I only took 120 plus frame stills in campaign mode. Overall, Black Ops Cold War is an awesome game with awesome campaign missions and awesome multiplayer maps. I really enjoyed the narrative of the campaign and of course the care that went into designing the maps. But the multiplayer maps are something else. Something special, but in a different way than campaign. And that's because the story is right there in front of you. You practically are playing the narrative of the map by being on the NATO or Warsaw Pact side. But most players don't know the story. The story isn't being explicitly told by any party. And that's why I encourage you to go into a custom match and just look around for a bit. Look at what's around you. Try to piece the story from your own perspective. Look out for ambient sounds scattered across the map that will aid you into piecing it together. And just appreciate the map for what it is. It's a 3-dimensional movie with you as a character. And remember, when you take the time to look around and photograph the in-game world, that is considered as its own game. Thank you for watching.